story of it's the story of American history told through the perspective of generally the white underclass, and it intersects with the story of race at several key points, and I hope we'll have a chance to talk about that. But that group, that because of course we now are cursed with living in interesting times, it's a group that has suddenly received a lot of cultural analysis, and there have been many books published recently about trying to understand this segment of American society that so often doesn't get remarked upon, or that gets flown over, or neglected in many of our political discussions, but has kind of reasserted itself as an important group. And for the national political conversation, it's been interesting to read how issues of class in the last couple of years have suddenly been on the front pages of newspapers and on cable news shows, trying to understand who is this group and what do they want and what happened and how does it matter to the American political present. And I think this rather sudden preoccupation with class issues tells us something about a lack in the way we've told the story of American history and the way it's been taught in schools. We tend to cover the groups that are in power. We cover presidential history, the great decisions that go behind wars, and we do give some attention to groups that have been disenfranchised at different points. We do have Black History Month that's sometimes honored in the breach, but it is supposedly part of the core curriculum of so many school districts in our country. We do have a kind of framework for talking about women's history and the development of suffrage and equal rights and so on, but we have an impoverished language for thinking about social class and economic inequality, and that's why I think this book is so important and really gives us a deep backdrop. We can't understand the issues about what's happening today without understanding where they've come from over a long period of time. And so I wanted to start with Nancy by asking you, why do you think Americans have had so much trouble talking about class, given that it's been so central to the shaping of the American experience? Why has this sort of caught folks by surprise now?
Well, I think one of the reasons that we don't like to talk about class can take us back to the American Revolution. One of the people that I write about in this book is Thomas Jefferson. What is he known for? The Declaration of Independence. And one of the things that Jefferson and the founders used to mobilize the revolution, and then the next generation to define why the revolution was important, is that we had broken from the British class system, that we were creating a new and distinctive nation. And as we know, politics is about political rhetoric. It is about how do we define ourselves as a nation. And often nations, and ours is true in this case, we define ourselves in opposition to some other nation, and that was Great Britain. So this has always been a part of the story. In addition to that myth, we have the other myth that Jefferson and Benjamin Franklin, who I write about, are also responsible for. We also imagine that America is the land of opportunity. This is the idea that people who come to this country come because they know that this is the land where you can rise up the ladder. The idea that if you do work hard, that you will succeed. One of the things I point out in this book, what we forget when we tell that story, is that there's been much more downward mobility in this country than upward mobility. Because that's not the happy story that we want to hear. We don't want to talk about failure. We don't want to talk about people who are losers. We don't want to talk about people who don't fit the scenario of what it means to be an American. Now, the way Franklin and Jefferson contributed to this myth, what the founders actually believed at the time of the Revolution is that what was distinctive about the United States was that we were going to occupy a continent. And Tom Paine sort of dismissively referred to, there's no way a continent should be ruled by a tiny island. So that that continent metaphor was very important because this fits in and continues into the 19th century, this idea that the promise of America, the idea of social mobility, was actually tied to being able to move westward. And that myth, what Franklin and Jefferson were really promising, was horizontal mobility. It wasn't upward mobility, because even as poor people, and they did, and I talk about them, these are the squatters and crackers who do move west, what did they find? Well, they found that the class system had moved west with them. And powerful land speculators, people with connections to government officials, got the best land and had the inside track on not only land, but being in a position to take advantage of opportunities in the West.